In the shining heart of Viralia Prime, the capital station of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Lyra Jensen moved like a calm shadow among louder beings. She smiled often, spoke only when necessary, and never raised her voice, no matter how tense the meetings became. Humans had earned a reputation as peacekeepers, quiet diplomats who listened more than they spoke. Other species, like the fire-blooded Jarneks or the proud steel-cloaked Cathari, often whispered behind Lyra's back. They laughed about Earth's endless patience, calling humans the tea drinkers of war or scribes with soft bones. Lyra heard the jokes but never reacted. That's what made her so unsettling. Whenever a new conflict threatened to rise between member species, be it over trade routes, disputed borders, or old grudges, humans were always the first to step forward with calm proposals and peaceful mediation. This time was no different. A skirmish broke out between the Xerec Coalition and the Tavanti Syndicate, two old enemies who shared a bitter border and even older wounds. A single patrol ship lost, a mining station burned. It wasn't a war yet, but everyone could feel the tension in the air tightening like a drawn bow. And as always, Earth's representative offered to mediate. "Let us help you talk," Lyra said in the Grand Hall, standing between the two snarling delegations. Her voice was soft, her expression unreadable. The Xerec shook their head ridges and mocked her calmness. The Tavanti clicked their teeth in irritation. But the Concord Council, tired of centuries of bloodshed, once again applauded Earth's gentle hand. "Humans are endlessly patient," said one counselor. "They are the only species who have never struck first." And it was true. For over 100 years, since the day Earth joined the Concord, they had never started a war, never threatened, never demanded, never showed their teeth. But they had watched. Deep inside a small data relay station on the lower levels of Viralia Prime, a silent transmission buzzed through private channels. Two unknown sources spoke in coded language, but one word kept repeating: Redline dossiers. Someone had broken into Earth's private network and intercepted part of a file. What they saw was disturbing. Maps of every known fleet, the exact positions of patrols, timelines of military drills from every major species, and detailed behavior logs of generals who never met a human face-to-face. Every move, every battle, every ship launch from the last 50 years, recorded, cross-checked, and analyzed. The human files were more complete than most governments' own intelligence. There were even prediction models estimating the chances of surprise attacks, and the projected time Earth would take to erase them. It wasn't defense, it was calculation. When the report quietly circulated among the highest levels of the Concord, panic didn't erupt right away. But questions began to form in dark corners. Why were the humans so quiet? Why did they always offer peace but never ask for favors? Why had Earth built so many deep space observation posts in neutral sectors, each staffed with what appeared to be harmless scientists? Lyra, meanwhile, returned to her quarters without a single shift in her tone. She poured herself a cup of spiced root tea, sat beside the large glass window that overlooked the stars, and opened a datapad filled with unread reports from Earth's Defense Intelligence Bureau. She didn't need to read them. She already knew what they said. The galaxy thought humans were soft because they rarely responded. What they didn't understand, what they had never seen, was that humanity had learned something long ago. Wars are not won by shouting or showing power too early. They are won by knowing when to end a fight before it truly begins. And Earth had been preparing for the day the galaxy made the mistake of pushing too far. In the quiet shadows of the Demeron system, far from the eyes of most galactic, Conquered Worlds, a small human outpost orbited a lifeless moon, watching, listening, and remaining unnoticed. It had no weapons, no visible defenses, and was staffed by only 37 personnel, mostly engineers and analysts. To most, it looked like another harmless Earth observation post, gathering cosmic data and monitoring asteroid drift. But the Tevanti Syndicate, proud and bold, saw it as something else, a test. They believed humanity had become too soft, too patient, too slow to act. So under the cover of darkness and falsified coordinates, they sent a fleet of raiders who surrounded the station in silence. No warning was given. In less than 10 minutes, the outpost was destroyed. No escape pods launched. No distress signal reached the central Concord. But Earth knew. Earth always knew. Within hours, human diplomats filed a formal protest. Precise, emotionless, and laced with carefully chosen words. "We request an open investigation. We await accountability." The galaxy laughed. Again. Some species called it a soft response. Others rolled their eyes, certain Earth would, as always, do nothing. The Tevanti celebrated privately, boasting that the humans had finally been shown their place. Across the Concord, military leaders once again dismissed Earth's defense fleet as a symbolic force, more ceremonial than combat-ready. "They wear medals, not armor," one admiral said. "Their commanders are historians, not soldiers." But one man did wear armor, though not the kind the galaxy could see. Colonel Elias Stone stood aboard the orbital station Vigilance, deep in Earth's third defense ring. A cold, unblinking man who had not smiled in years, Stone read the transmission from command without flinching. It was only 3 lines long. "Red line breach confirmed. Hold position. Observe. Do not respond." No anger, no urgency, just orders. Stone relayed the command to his officers and locked down Vigilance. Behind his calm stare, a different kind of storm was building. Far beneath Earth's surface, buried under ice and steel, a forgotten vault pulsed with new life. For decades it had slept in silence, surrounded by thick walls of code and silence. Now it awakened. The Sable Protocol, written 50 years ago, by Earth's most paranoid minds, came online. It was not a battle plan. It was a conclusion. A final measure created not to win wars, but to prevent them by promising something worse than defeat: total removal. The protocol began its quiet work, syncing with every human satellite, drone, and hidden listening post. It reached deep into archives, pulling centuries of data, analyzing past patterns of aggression from every conquered species, predicting future behavior with terrifying accuracy. But that wasn't all. In a dark corner of Mars's underground network, a system that hadn't seen activation in 74 years came alive. Designation: Odin 9. A black site artificial intelligence so dangerous, it had been disconnected from all known systems by a council of Earth's own generals. Now it was back. Odin 9 began pulling data at impossible speeds, rerouting signals to dead sectors of human space, old colonies, abandoned science stations, long-forgotten mining rigs. Each location, now suddenly active, started transmitting again. Something was moving. And yet, to the galaxy, it looked like nothing was happening. No fleets launched, no weapons charged, no threats made, only silence from Earth and a formal request for justice. Ambassador Lyra Jensen continued her daily meetings at HFY Prime, calm and steady. Colonel Stone waited on Vigilance, eyes on the stars. But in secret, Earth's long fuse had finally burned to its end. The mistake had been made, not in attacking a station, but in assuming that humanity's patience was weakness. The Sable Protocol didn't trigger when humans were afraid. It triggered when the galaxy showed it had learned nothing. For days, nothing happened. The conquered halls were filled with rumors and restless whispers, but Earth said nothing. Then, without explanation or ceremony, all human diplomats stationed. Indisputed systems quietly returned to Earth. Embassies shut down. Peacekeeping missions paused. Human envoys who once stood at the center of every negotiation simply vanished. Some Concord officials called it a retreat. Others said Earth was withdrawing from galactic politics for good. But a few, the older, ones with long memories, remembered Earth's silence before the Demeran War, and they did not sleep well that night. Then came the blackout. The Tavanti Syndicate's home system, once a blazing hub of warships and military might, went completely dark. No signals, no traffic, not even a civilian beacon. At first, other species thought it was a technical fault. But soon, independent satellites at the edge of the system began sending fragments of what they had seen, just before their feeds were cut. A Tavanti orbital station breaking apart mid-transmission. A massive fleet splitting into pieces without warning. Fires blooming in space with no visible attackers. And above all, the timing. Exactly 12 minutes from the first impact to complete silence. Every military installation gone. No resistance recorded. No survivors reported. Panic spread across the Concord Council like wildfire. An emergency. Summit was called on Virelia Prime, where leaders of dozens of species gathered in fear and confusion. No one claimed responsibility. No one had seen any human ships. No weapons were traced back to Earth. But everyone knew. The Tavanti were not just punished. They were erased. And still, Earth remained silent. That silence was finally broken when Ambassador Lyra Jensen entered the summit chamber, her face as calm as ever. She walked slowly to the center, stood, before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and looked at them with the kind of stillness that felt heavier than any speech. Then she spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough that every translator hummed in unison. "You thought we were soft. Because we never struck first," she said. "But you never stopped to ask what happens when we choose to strike last." The room went silent. Lyra said nothing more. She turned and left the hall, leaving behind a weight that no one could shake off. Moments later, another report leaked to the council, one not meant to be seen. It revealed the truth about the so-called Human Peace Corps, an organization long praised for its work in conflict zones. For decades, they had delivered aid, negotiated truces, and rebuilt shattered colonies. But beneath the surface, they had been something else entirely. Every aid worker had a second role. Engineers were infiltration experts. Medical officers were intelligence agents. Logistic teams carried devices not found in any public human database. Strategic infiltration teams trained to blend in and wait for decades if needed, embedded across the galaxy, studying weaknesses, tracking fleet patterns, and preparing for a single, unified response if Earth was ever truly threatened. The files also showed how long the plan had been in place, since the first time a human ambassador was insulted during Concord meetings. Earth had not forgotten, they had only waited, and when the attack on the Demeran outpost came, that waiting ended. The Sable Protocol, the Odin 9 AI, the pullback of diplomats. It had all been planned like pieces on a board, moved one at a time, quietly, until there was only one move left. Earth hadn't wanted to destroy anyone, but they had always known what would happen if someone misunderstood patience as fear. Now, the galaxy understood. Humanity had never been soft. They had been silent. And their silence had always meant preparation. The galaxy trembled, not with noise or war cries, but with silence, an unnatural stillness that followed Earth's unspoken retaliation. The Tavanti system had gone dark without warning, and now, the other powers, once dominant and proud, were faced with something they couldn't understand. A threat without a face, without a fleet, without a speech. Still, fear is a dangerous thing when paired with pride. The Cathari, the Vanur, and several smaller empires, shaken by what had happened, believed Earth could still be tested. They formed a temporary coalition, sending scout fleets near human space, probing its edges to find some sign of weakness. No warnings were issued, No weapons were activated. But within hours of crossing into Earth's outer systems, those fleets disappeared. No distress calls, no signals, no floating wreckage, just empty silence and blinking sensors that picked up nothing. It was as if the ships had never existed. Across the Concorde, meetings turned into crisis sessions. Scientists tried to explain the disappearances as black holes, gravitational distortions, or even cloaked attacks. But deep inside, everyone began to understand the truth. It was not a glitch. It was the Sable Protocol in motion. Unlike most war doctrines that focused on defense, retaliation, or strategic advantage, the Sable Protocol had one objective: permanent deterrence. It had been written long ago by Earth's top minds, not to win battles, but to remove the ability for battles to happen again. And now that the protocol was active, Earth wasn't fighting back. It was finishing what others had started. The message was clear: provoke humanity, and you would not get a warning or a war. You would simply disappear. As more systems fell, quiet and border stations turned to ash without ever raising alarms, the last pieces of resistance began to fall. A desperate envoy, made of diplomats from 12 major species, requested an emergency audience with Earth. They didn't arrive on their own ships. They came aboard a neutral Concorde vessel under full white lights, arms open, communications unencrypted. When they reached Earth's High Council chambers, their tone had changed. Gone was the arrogance, the mockery, the laughter. Now, there was only one question: what does Earth want? Humanity's response was calm but absolute. There would be no further conflict if the galaxy agreed to new terms. First, demilitarization zones around Earth and its allied systems. No warships allowed within 30 light-years. Second, the redistribution of power inside the galactic Concorde, with human-led oversight councils to ensure neutrality and accountability. And lastly, a galaxy-wide ban on covert military buildups, monitored by Earth's intelligence teams. The terms were not presented as negotiation. They were offered as the only path forward. Some tried to argue, some said it was unfair, but none dared test Earth again. And in a quiet corner of the Concorde archives, an old alien admiral reviewed a digital document buried under centuries of history. It was from Earth's early records, before they had joined the stars. A single quote stood out, marked by a leader from an ancient human war. No one starts a fight with a sleeping giant, because when it wakes, it does not stop swinging. The admiral closed the file and leaned back, finally understanding what had been missed for so long. Humanity was never passive. They were calculating. They were patient, and they had built their place in the galaxy not with loud strength, but with quiet control. The rebalancing had begun, not through explosions, but through the slow, cold realization that Earth was no longer just a member of the Concorde. They were the hand on the scale, and the galaxy, still trying to make sense of it, could only watch and adjust, because now peace didn't come from fear of war. It came from the knowledge that the last war might already have ended, and Earth had won it without ever declaring it. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it changed completely. There were no more whispers behind Earth's back, no more laughter in council chambers, no more jokes about humans drinking tea during war councils. After the disappearances, the sudden silence of entire fleets, and the swift collapse of the Tavanti military zone, every species realized what Earth truly was. Not weak, not peaceful, not naive. They were deliberate. They had waited for 100 years, learning, building, and preparing not to conquer, but to make sure no one would ever dare to try. There was no ceremony to mark Earth's quiet rise to dominance. There were no parades, no declarations. The change came in the stillness, when no species questioned Earth's words, when no commander tested Earth's borders, and when every council vote paused until Ambassador Lyra Jensen had spoken. She had not changed in appearance. She still wore the same dark formal suit. She still smiled softly and nodded with patience during long debates. But now, when she rose to speak, all eyes followed her, and all voices fell silent. The other members of the Concord began to shift their priorities. Formerly powerful nations closed down secret weapons programs. Border skirmishes dropped to near zero. Entire fleets were disbanded without being asked. Not because Earth demanded it, but because the memory of what had happened to the Tavanti still haunted every high-ranking official. They feared what they could not see and what they could not stop. At the core of the Concord, Earth began to establish a system of quiet order. Peacekeeping oversight groups were formed, guided by human officers, most of whom had backgrounds in intelligence, diplomacy, or deep space operations. These councils didn't carry weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough. Earth didn't claim control, but everyone knew who was in control. It wasn't power forced through strength. It was influence built on the certainty that the alternative would be worse than surrender. Across distant colonies, shrines began to appear. Some called it superstition, others called it fear. But many alien cultures, especially those who once mocked Earth, now treated human presence like something sacred. Stories spread of the Watchers, human agents who had walked among their people for years, collecting secrets, never acting, until the time came. The image of humans changed from friendly diplomats to something far older in spirit, like silent gods walking in plain clothes. Meanwhile, Earth returned to its usual place in the conquered chambers, as if nothing had happened. They made proposals for fair trade, sent food to struggling systems, and offered help to those recovering from economic loss. But no one saw these acts as weakness anymore. They saw them as warnings wrapped in kindness. If they are this generous, after what we did, one alien senator whispered, then imagine what happens if we disappoint them again. Ambassador Jensen resumed her duties without showing the weight of what she had helped unleash. Her words were still kind, her advice still reasonable. But now, her presence alone carried the authority of an empire that had no flag and no borders, only quiet, perfect readiness. The Sable Protocol remained active but hidden, like a ghost under the floor of every council meeting. No one knew when it would be triggered again, but no one wanted to find out. Humanity had taken its place in the galaxy not by fire, but by silence, by becoming the final consequence. On the last day of that conquered cycle, Ambassador Jensen stood to deliver Earth's final message of the session. She closed her datapad slowly, let her gaze sweep across the silent chamber, and with that same calm voice the galaxy now listened to with reverence, she said, "We were never peacekeepers. We were just waiting for the galaxy to give us permission."